the plants, the soil, and the air, and eventually the other animals that live in the ecosystem. Then only about 1 to 10% that falls on the green plants is absorbed by their chlorophyll. Can you see that that is very, very small? Out of the 100%, we have just 1 to 10% that is used in manufacturing food. And if green plant is using 1 to 10%, then you know what we get to other organisms in the ecosystem. So just 1 to 10% falls on the green plant, which is being absorbed by the chlorophyll. You know, chlorophyll is responsible for photosynthesis in plants. Then the rest is reflected. The rest of this energy is reflected, is refracted, is radiated from the leaf and end up as heat without entering the ecosystem. Can you imagine that? The remaining is just discarded from the leaf surface and then it ends up as heat. Then you find it generating heat without entering into the ecosystem. Now, we want to talk about the terminologies of energy transfer. The first terminology of energy transfer that we'll be considering is the gross primary productivity, that's the GPP. It is the rate at which photosynthetic products are formed by the producer per unit area per unit time. That is, the rate at which producers, producers are basically plants, the rate at which they form photosynthetic products, that is, the rate at which they undergo photosynthesis per unit area of the land per time is what we call the gross primary productivity, the GPP. Then the next one is the net primary productivity, the NPP. This is the rate at which photosynthetic products are stored by the producer. There is one thing for you to produce something and another for you to keep that thing. So the rate at which they keep or store the photosynthetic product that is being produced by the producer is called the net primary productivity. Then this is a diagram representing the energy transfer in the ecosystem that I explained the other time. You find the sun being the source of the energy. Then it transfers 1%. It is efficient. It is 1% efficient. Then you find the first energy level, and that is occupied by the producers or the green plants. Then the energy transfer at that level is just 20% efficient. Then you find the second energy level occupied by the primary consumers or the herbivores. And energy transfer there is 5 to 20% efficient. Then the next level is the third energy level occupied by the second consumer or the small carnivores. And at that level, energy transfer is 5 to 20%. Then you have the third consumer level at the fourth energy level, the third consumer, that's the large carnivore. So this is a diagrammatic representation of what we have said about energy transfer in an ecosystem. Now we move on to talk about thermodynamics and its law. What thermodynamics is all about and the law that governs thermodynamics. All heat processes conform to the fundamental law of thermodynamics. That's one thing you should keep at the back of your mind, that all heat processes conform to the fundamental laws of thermodynamics. Then there is what we call energy change, which is the conversion of one type of energy into another. Casting your mind back to your elementary science, you remember that we said there are different kinds of energy. You have the solar energy, kinetic energy, the potential energy, light energy, chemical energy, and the likes. And these energy are being converted from one state to another. So the change or the conversion that occurs for the energy to be converted from one state to another is called the energy change. Thermodynamics has two fundamental laws, and the first one states that when one form of energy is converted into another, it is neither created nor destroyed. So energy is neither created nor destroyed. When one form of energy is converted from one form to another, it is neither created or destroyed. The total amount of energy resulting from a conversion is equal to the initial amount of energy. That is, when you have 750 kilocalories of solar energy being converted into light energy. It is also 750 kilocalories of light energy. It's the same level of energy that you have, the same amount. Energy is not lost and then it is not created. All energy is not necessarily in the same form. I've said that earlier, that we have various forms of energy, and I mentioned them earlier. For example, light energy from the sun is converted into chemical energy in plants in the photosynthetic process, and that's what we've been saying all the while, that there is the energy that is being released from the sun, which helps the plant to manufacture its own food. And I said food energy is what is called the chemical energy. Then food can be converted into a variety of other forms of energy. You find food energy after the plant has taken the food, or the animal has taken food now. The animal can convert the food into its energy. It can also convert it into kinetic energy, that is, the animal will move. It can be potential energy, as I'm standing. So the food energy can be converted into all sorts of energy. Then in the muscle of an animal, chemical energy is converted to mechanical energy of muscular contraction. By the time the heart is contracting, the pumping action of the heart, then you find that's another conversion of chemical energy into mechanical energy. And mechanical energy is divided into two. We have the potential energy and the kinetic energy. To the second law of thermodynamics. The second law of thermodynamics states that when one form of energy is converted into another, a proportion is converted into it. That is, when a particular form of energy is converted into another form, a part of that energy is converted into it. The first law says that energy is neither created nor destroyed when one form of energy is converted into another. The second law says, still continuing that, states that when one form of energy is converted into another, a proportion is turned into it. We will be looking at the application of these two laws as it affects the organisms of the ecosystem. Only a small percentage of energy absorbed by green plants is turned into food energy. A small percentage of energy absorbed from the sunlight by the green plant is turned into food or chemical energy. The rest is converted into its energy. If you cast your mind back to the analysis of the food chain and the ecological pyramids that we talked about, especially ecological pyramid, the pyramid of energy, I said energy reduces as it goes up. Is it that the energy was destroyed? No. The energy that is converted, the remaining, is converted into it, but we neglected the portion of the it. That's why I said it reduces. Now, only about 1% of the energy an organism takes in is stored in the tissue of that organism. Just about 1% of energy taken in by the organism is stored in the tissue. The rest is converted into it. Then this energy puts a limit to the number of organisms that may be found at each trophic level. When the energy is limited, then the organisms that are found at trophic level is also limited, because if it is not limited, there will be competition with setting, which may lead to cannibalism, that is, organisms eating themselves up. Now we are moving on to the next topic, relevance of biology to agriculture. Under that, we'll be talking about the classification of plants, botanical classification of plants, agricultural classification of plants. First, we look at the botanical classification of plants. Plants are classified botanically according to their structure, presence of flowers, and their mode of reproduction. And that is where we have the spermatophytes, the angiosperms, gymnosperms. Then we have the angiosperms divided into monocots and dicots. I've explained this earlier. Then the gymnosperms divided into talophytes, bryophytes, and pteridophytes. We talked about this earlier on. Now we move on to the agricultural classification of plants. How are plants classified agriculturally? Plants are classified based on their significance economic value agriculturally. That is, what value do they have agriculturally? That's what we mean by agricultural classification of plants. And they are basically divided into two main classes. We have the cereals, the food crop, and the cash crop. The food crops and the cash crop. That is the two main classes of agricultural classification of plants. Now, under the food crops, we have the cereals, the legumes, and the rest. So I'll be talking about them one by one. The cereals belong to the grass family, and they include maize, rice, millet, guinea corn, wheat. Grass family in the sense that when you look at their leaves, you discover that they look like the plant, they look like grasses. All this, your panicum, cylindrical, maximum panicum, is that all those long, they have very long leaf and tiny. They are not as wide. They are very long but not wide. So that's the grasses that I'm referring to. So cereals belong to the grass family, and their example, you see them in maize, in rice, in millet, guinea corn, and wheat. Then the legumes. The legumes are an important source of dietary protein. They replenish the soil with their nitrogen. They have what we call nitrogen fixing bacteria in their nodules. So an example of legumes, we have the beans, groundnuts, soybeans. So those are examples of legumes under the food crop. Then we have the tubers. The food crop are just food that we eat.